Ready?
You want to sit here?
Thank you everyone for coming today. So, people here may know him under various guises: early employee of Facebook, investor, SPAC king, owner of the Warriors, and the dictator. He has invested globally in companies such as Slack, Tesla, SpaceX through his fund Social Capital, and his All In podcast has millions of weekly listens. Born in Sri Lanka, he immigrated to Canada at a young age where his family was granted refugee status. He received his undergraduate degree in electrical engineering from the University of Waterloo and is a proud father of 5. It is with a great pleasure that I introduce our speaker of the evening, Chamath Palihapitiya.
How are you?
Chamath, it is such a great pleasure to have you here today. On behalf of everyone in this room, thank you for sharing your time, and we really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Most people know you from your various endeavors: Facebook, Social Capital, the All In podcast. But I'd love to jump straight into it. This morning you published an op-ed on regulating AI in which you said, I quote, "Federal oversight is necessary, not just to keep people safe, but also to scale technology in a sustainable way." What do you mean by this?
There's a line in there that was even more important, which is that you have to remember in 2007, 8, and 9, my team at Facebook was the one that was experimenting with these very early forms of machine learning and artificial intelligence, and what you saw in your newsfeed, and then ultimately what drives the algorithmic views in Instagram and whatnot, and then has been copied by everybody from TikTok to whatever, is based on these principles that computers are doing more and more of the thinking for you. So at the time, our goal was just to run as fast as possible because frankly, the idea was win at all costs and make as much money. And that was a very justifiable thing back in the day because it was not clear that there was, what the negative externalities of that would be. And then in mid 2015 or 16, Sundar Pichai had this earnings call, and he obliquely mentions that they're building a specific chip for machine learning. I hunted that team down inside of Google and I pulled them out and we started building basically what comes after NVIDIA, right? So what is the next version of silicon that powers all these models called Grok?
Google, Microsoft, all these guys are kind of building their own chips now, is that?
Everybody's building certain forms of silicon, whether it's FPGAs, their own chips. Grok, this company is doing it. Cerebras is another company doing it. Anyways, the point is, I've been kind of in and around this space for a while, but the thing that was really missing was the broad exposure of these models in the wild for people like you guys to consume them. And I've been personally pretty shocked at how fast we've come in how short an amount of time. And the reality is that for every good person that has a good idea at this point, I think that the motive of making money is just so extreme, it's never been more extreme, that people will push the boundaries of what's right. And if you allow these ideas to basically get released into these app stores or just be available as endpoints that auto GPTs can consume and they're just publicly free floating, for every good thing, I think you're going to have 2 or 3 bad things.
But then how the hell do you regulate it? There's so much innovation, it's pretty hard to kind of put a lid on it now.
Well, I think the way that it has to work is that, ultimately, the internet is governed by, call it, a handful of major actors, both in the app stores, a handful of major clouds, and they're governed by a whole bunch of well-known internet connectivity providers. We already have the ability to sort of like packet sniff and figure out how to have rule-based access to certain things, right? There's an entire part of infrastructure and security that do that. So we're just going to have to do that. We're going to have to pose on Amazon and Google and Microsoft and all of these folks certain limitations. And I think probably what you'll have to do is submit a model someplace where it can be run in an isolated manner in a sandbox where we can observe what it does and really have certainty that it's not going to do something nefarious before it's really allowed to be consumed. That is the only way to stop it in a world of auto GPTs, where otherwise code will write itself, endpoints will write itself, and it'll just scale. It's really scary, I think.
And then, but like these bad actors, it could, like someone with like 1 terabyte of information now can be out there.
See, the thing is, these bad actors will be only known after the fact. They'll look like smart scientific researchers who are trying to find a new molecule for X, Y, and Z. The problem is that somewhere along the way, the AutoGPT will also find the toxic version of that molecule. Both will get 3D printed. And then the idea is, how do you prevent them both from being tested? And what if one of them becomes really communicable?
What?
You just saw that that maybe did not or didn't happen. And it shut the world down. And that was before we had machines that would just do the entire tool chain automatically, where there was no human intervention. There was no Wuhan lab of virology we're going to be able to point our finger to.
All right.
Not that that happened. You know what I'm saying.
So everyone in this room is kind of wondering, you know, should we pivot into AI? Should we be doing something different? Like, how does this look in 2 years? And how does it look in 20 years for your children? Like,
so difficult to say. I think this is the most dynamic moment in human history that we've had technologically in the modern era. I think it is the equivalent of the shift from an agrarian economy to an industrial economy. You know, we are literally going to have to refactor entire swaths of the human population in terms of what we do, right? Useful work is going to get redefined. And so we have to take our time and figure this out. From my perspective, I think that there's just going to be an enormous number of dead ends in terms of things that you think are the answer that turn out to be mostly useless. As an example, like, you know, we were breathlessly talking about plugins 4 weeks ago, the ChatGPT plugins, and then 2 weeks later, AutoGPTs makes the whole thing sort of kind of pointless. So I just think like you're having these creative and destructive cycles happen so quickly that it's going to take a long time for us to really figure out how things will stabilize. That's probably a 2 to 3 year exercise.
got it.
And so it's like it's the point to be in learning mode as opposed to be doing mode.
And so the past couple of years, you've been pretty vocal on 2 big themes. One is that in the next decade, the marginal cost of energy and the marginal cost of compute are both going to 0. And how do you, this like AI wave, how do you overlay those on your themes? And does this change your strategy moving forward?
So if you look at a graph of energy costs, right, solar and wind are effectively 0 today, 3 cents a kilowatt hour. They will be 0 by 2030. The cost of renting NVIDIA GPUs is basically 0. And by the time that all these competitors are in market, it'll effectively be 0, right? Your instances will cost nothing. You multiply those 2 together, nothing times nothing is nothing. So some random person, again, with an idea, will be able to deploy this thing for hundreds of dollars using a credit card. So this is why I think all of these things together it's almost a perfect storm that needs to be very tightly monitored. And if you take a step back, energy is a highly regulated area for a reason, because unlimited energy in the hands of some rando person can also be highly destructive, right? Unlimited compute, if you misdirected it in the wrong problem space, can be highly destructive. So we're in a very delicate moment. But if you put a bunch of AI models on a place where for tens of dollars, you can do basically the entire sum of the world's work up until that point. I don't exactly know what happens, but it's a very scary moment in human history.
Yeah, because it feels like, what do people do in this new world? Everything.
So Buffett had this great thing where he dissected the agrarian economy in one of his letters. And at the turn of the century, it was like, 50, 60% of the human workforce was working on a farm. And then fast forward, but 30 years later into World War I, and it was down to 8%, but we had found enough, we had tripled the food supply. There's some equation like this. It's a really interesting thing. So what happened then? Probably some similar version of what happens now. Back then, people were literally toiling around with their hands, pulling potatoes out of the dirt. And this tractor comes along, and it just completely changed how we thought about sustaining ourselves. And so then people all of a sudden were able to go to school, they educated themselves, they invented the entire service economy that didn't exist before then. So yeah, we'll be, painting as a service. You'll want a painting, she'll make it for you. He'll want some bread, he'll make it for you. Who knows? Maybe it's just some big communal Coachella, I don't know.
But you have to make bets, I guess. You've got a lot of money at social capital. What do you do in this world?
Yeah, I think that there are like two ways of dissecting this. But again, I reserve the right to change my mind. But in one spectrum, I learned that after all these SPACs, by the way. I should have said that louder and more often. But in this one spectrum, I think that there are only two ways to make money. There are picks and shovels, so you're selling chips and hardware, or you have basically these white truffles, these sources of unique data. Here's a really unique example that someone told me. If you look at, how many of you guys use travel sites, like Travelocity, Expedia, Kayak, Booking, right? You guys know that those are all middleman businesses, or middle person businesses, that sit on top of Sabre and a couple of other primary data sources. So what is stopping Sabre from actually just going direct and just creating an agent that just says, here's my data, you can use it, and then somebody like Facebook saying, let me just integrate it into WhatsApp. Now you can just type into the thing, book me a ticket to New York City with these parameters, and it's done. Why do the travel sites exist? So in that equation, the white truffle is Sabre, because they did all the hard work of going to all of the hotels and all of the airlines and collecting all this data and exposing it, right? If you think about the world that way, you can see a ton of companies that today are just literally zombies, but they haven't been told that yet. So that's one way of looking at the world. Picks and shovels are investable, white truffles are investable, right? Somebody should maybe do a hostile takeover or an activist campaign on Sabre and just say, hey, you guys just need to fire everybody, replace it with a bunch of auto GPTs and just monetize travel. The public travel companies are like, I don't know, $300 billion of market cap globally, 400 billion. Those should all not exist theoretically. Mm-hmm. Then a different way to think about it is like you take a legacy business and you ask yourself, what happens to operating expenses, OpEx, if you just run AI through the whole thing? We'll start with customer service. That's probably 10% of OpEx. Gone. For example, I was at the Breakthrough Awards last weekend, I think. In LA, it was in LA. This is a thing that Yuri Milner does, great thing. Anyways, I was flying back with somebody, very well-known guy in AI, and he had trained a model and eliminated a third of his workforce in the matter of 6 weeks. And now he's at the bleeding edge, right?
People here are just like, shit, how am I going to get a job now?
I mean, you'll be painting as a service, muffins as a service, bread as a service. You'll have to work with your physical hands, maybe. But my point is like, so, maybe there's an interesting way I've been thinking about private equity. Maybe I should actually just buy a company that's old and maybe people would say shitty and just reimagine it with a whole bunch of tools doing a lot of the work that humans used to do, but just doing it in a better way for people so that customers can adopt it. Another idea, which I think I mentioned it once, but I'm really fascinated with this, and this I'm probably going to pursue before anything else, is starting a little bit of an accelerator. So at some point I'll come back to you guys, and if you want to work there, you can apply to it. But I would love to start 50 little companies. Each of them would be 2 or 3 of you. I'll give you $1 million or 2 million or 3 million bucks, whatever. But it'll be constrained by capital so that you are forced to go and use tools and write some GPTs and consume auto GPTs and have the GPTs consume the blah, blah, blah. And let's go and rebuild the entire enterprise software stack and then just price it at 1/100th of the cost. That's going to happen. We should probably do it. So I think those are some really interesting things. Like, I think like the birth of the 2 or 3 person company is at hand.
Like if you've got...
By the way, that makes sense, right? Because if you think about it, what was the largest company in the 1500s? In the UK, East West Trading Company or whatever, right?
East India Company.
East India Company, right? If you looked inside of the United States in the 1800s, how many real large corporations were there? 5, right? If you look at today, how many real large corporations are there? Maybe 250, 300. So the point is, we've been atomizing capitalism, right? It's gone from one unitary thing and it's been getting smaller and smaller. That's how the services economy has emerged, and all these small companies that do services for medium-sized companies. It's like the remora fish kind of idea. Well, maybe this AI just takes it to the extreme, and there's just millions of 1- and 2-person companies. Maybe that's how it works. So I don't exactly quite know, but I think that, we need to be now pushing boundaries to figure out whether these things are possible.
Got it. And so let's talk a little bit about social capital. In 2022, you spoke social capital, which, talked to us a little bit about that, but then it said, one of the toughest years you've ever faced. Can you run through your experience of 2022 and the learnings you got during that market cycle?
2022, I took several $1 billion of my money. I put it in a pot, filled it with gasoline, and then just lit it on fire. And then I was like, you know what? I should do more of that. Then I did it again. No, it was brutally hard. What was hard about it? Look, there are moments in your career, there'll be moments in your career where everything goes right. And I've preached this so often, but I fell for it, which is, it's not you, it's the moment. And the problem was, I thought it was me. There was elements of that phase frankly, from 2007 at Facebook to 2021, where as much as I tried to say, I'm a part of a system of zero rates and being in tech and it's super deflationary and everybody in the world needs it, it's only so possible to be, just think that it's not you. And in that, what happens is I developed some blind spots. And the biggest blind spot I developed was, and Stan Druckenmiller as an example, like such a genius, and he had been preaching this for years, and I would listen, or I would hear, but I wouldn't listen. And what he says is like the entire market can be summed up in one word, which is liquidity. You follow where the dollars are. And when dollars are being expanded into a system, asset prices go up and certain things, and people move out the risk curve. And then when liquidity shrinks and you take money out of the system, the opposite happens. And so right in front of us, what we saw was 15 years of unimpeded liquidity. The United States and Western governments pumping dollars into the system, inflating everything, and then deciding on a dime, oh, stop that, we're going to take it out. And so if you really embraced and listened to what he said, it was obvious that we had benefited and then we were going to pay the price.
But you actually called the end of the low interest rate cycle. So were you like...
Yeah, but I did not sell enough. Yeah, I did it. Now, ask me why I didn't sell enough.
Why not?
Well, I think that part of it was that I had gotten really enamored with this idea that, that I would in part be able to there was a period. I would tweet and things would go crazy, this and that, and go up and go down and go sideways, and I'm long GameStop just for shits and giggles. And it was a crazy, crazy time. And so I think it's in that where I a little bit lost a sense of myself.
Yeah.
That I was a small actor in a much larger system. And by the way, I think it's a blessing in disguise to go through that kind of pain and through that journey. You'll go through it in your own version. It's really important to be able to take a step back and realize, wow, I just got put through the ringer, but I got out the other end of it, and I'm no worse for wear, and I've learned a lot. So when I called the top, I wasn't willing to really act on it. I did it, but I didn't do enough of it. Yep. And why? And because I was afraid of what you would think, to be honest with you. I was afraid. Oh, wait a minute. You said you wouldn't sell. Now you're selling this. Wait a minute. You sold some of that. Well, why did you sell so much? Maybe you should sell less. Hey, hold on a second. You're going to cause other people to. And I got caught on that cycle too. Yeah,
because I guess early in your career, you made some big public investments, and then in recent years, you went...
early in my career, I would make these huge bets, and everybody thought I was an idiot. And that was a blessing. Bitcoin in 2011, I was ridiculed. I walked on stage in New York in front of 3,000 people. There's a conference called Irisone. I pitched Tesla in 2015, and they came in and they made fun of me, the guys, the hedge fund managers, on stage about me afterwards. They did the next year when I did Amazon. But in hindsight, it was amazing because there was, it's like, what's the worst that could happen? They already thought I was a crazy person.
But let's take, SPACs, for example. You became known as the SPAC king. I'm sure you made a ton of money in that. But like looking back on that and knowing what you know now, would you do it again? And what would you have done differently knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I learned an enormous amount. I would do it again. I think it will have its place in the capital markets ecosystem. Look, you have to understand, there's a ton of businesses today that die for totally the wrong reasons. A good reason for a company to die is when the product and the market, there is no fit between those two. Another good reason is if another competitor outruns them. Another good reason is that the team is either malignant or incompetent. Another good reason is that it's fraudulent. Now here's some bad reasons why. The idea is too ambitious. People don't want to take risk at scale. There's not enough factual data about something that they're trying to do, and so people just take a wait and see approach, but it creates this really tough existence proof. Those are bad reasons for companies to fail, in my opinion, especially when they're trying to do something really important. The SPAC, when used well, lowers the cost of capital for these companies specifically. If you're running an enterprise business, you can go and raise money. Why? Because it's easy to understand, it's easy to sort of like get early traction, and it's easy for social proof and validation. So that the investor here who puts in 5 million is validated by the person that puts in 10, who's validated by the person that put in 50, who's validated by the person that put in 500. If, however, you're like, I have this novel autologous cells, concept for chronic kidney disease, you know how many people are going to put their hands up and say, I'll write you $689 million? Well, in the world, there was 3 of us, me, Pablo Lagaretta, and Carlos Slim, which we did this deal, and we used the SPAC to do it. Those are hard problems that should not die because there isn't enough social validation for traditional organized capital to get behind. So a SPAC is a really powerful mechanism to do that. I think there were too many of them. And I think that we all lost sight of, again, this concept of liquidity. Where were we in the market cycle? But I think that if there was, a fifth of the number, I think we'd still be probably seeing more of them transact. And I think given 3 or 4 or 5 years, they'll be back.
Got it. And then, let's say social capital, 2018, there was a bit of a dramatic transition. You moved from managing outside capital to effectively being a family office. What actually happened during this period?
A lot of things happened. One is that personally, I had hit a wall and I was getting divorced. And I had just, nothing was working for me in my life, like nothing. I didn't know how to be a good friend. I didn't know how to be a good husband. I didn't know how to be a good dad. I didn't know how to be a good coworker. So that was one basket of issues. The second basket of issues was operationally, I needed to have done a better job of managing the business. And specifically, I had tried to organize and scale this thing because, the takeaway from Facebook is success only comes when you're growing. And I thought the metric of growth at that time was just assets under management. So I was like, okay, I manage 1, then 2, then 5, then 10, then $20 billion. That's what success should look like. It turns out that I should have been measuring growth slightly differently, which was more in this bucket, because I had such a barren toolkit of skills for me as a person. I ran, into a brick wall. Now, a bunch of my friends who are as equally shunted, I think, have not run into that wall because the success over here is just so grandiose on a second and frankly, 1 and 2 orders of magnitude from me. But I always think about them in the same context, which is we're all running on fumes and it all catches up with you. So 2018 was an opportunity for me to say, the metric of growth is actually need to be focused here, and I need to go and retool myself as a person.
And you have regrets from that period, or anything
None.
you've done differently?
None. I have regrets about none of it. None of it. And the reason is because I've learned through all of it.
Yeah.
Like I was in Costa Rica for spring break, and I was learning how to surf. I'd never surfed before. And there are moments where you just get pulled into the undertow and it just washes you out. And part of what you learn is like, you're just better off the moment you get out of it. You're like, wow, that was okay, I survived that. And the next wave doesn't really take you in the same way. And I think life is like that. I think too many people spend too much time trying to get all of this external validation. And that is what causes enormous amounts of pain and suffering. And then that's when your life becomes really shitty or unfulfilling. And most people are in this endless death spiral of that loop.
How do people get out of that loop? You know, go to a good university, go to a...
Oh, that'll exacerbate it.
Yeah.
That makes it worse.
That's what people do.
The worst thing is to go to a great school and be surrounded by fucking geniuses and say to yourself, am I the only idiot at Berkeley?
Yeah. No, I think
How many of you have had that feeling? Raise your hand if you've had that feeling. Yeah, most of you. How brutal is that feeling? I went to not nearly as prominent of a school as you guys, but University of Waterloo in Canada. And it was the same feeling. I walked into the school, incredible top engineering school, and I felt like the dumbest kid. And so you're fighting for a sense of belonging and a sense of self in a context where everybody has these bona fides that they're throwing in your face. Oh, my GPA was, 6.9 unweighted or whatever I had, 9,400 on the ACT, and you're just like, what? That's not even possible. You know what I mean?
No.
I won the mathematics Olympiad thrice, and you're like, holy shit. So there are all these ways where life can tell you that externally you're less than somebody else. So you have to find, I think, for me, what I found is I found a group of friends. That's kind of helpful. I found a life partner. That is probably the most important thing that'll happen in your life. That will help you find validation in these kind of like cues that only you will value. And then if and when you have kids, that's a huge thing. Those three groups of people, your partner, your kids, and your friends, will do more to make you feel like an amazing person. And so if you don't spend enough time on that, and you're running around trying to get this job and that internship, and then get this thing and that thing, and get paid a little bit more, then I'm gonna get this, it's just a fucking dead end.
Rat race. So, looking through your previous interviews, especially the early ones, there's a real sense of angry ambition, sometimes even rage.
No, anger. It was anger. It was insecure anger. It was about trying to prove to all these people that I thought were looking down on me that I deserved to be there. It was just, it's riddled with insecurity and anger.
But now you're so calm, so how have you managed this journey?
Well, now I'm rich, so I mean... I'm just kidding. No, honestly, I really think look, I play poker on Thursdays. I have a group of friends that just mean the world to me. We just take the piss out of each other constantly. And it's just such pure love. Like I said, I'm in a relationship that is just very profound for me. And I didn't think it was possible to be in that kind of relationship. I never gave myself credit. I'd never kind of even explored that idea. I came from a very traditional, very tightly defined South Asian family in an immigrant construct. And that is a box. And I think there are other people with similar boxes, but that box is a stifling, suffocating box. And I have spent years now destroying that box. in ways that are not measurable to anybody else because only your siblings understand it. Your kids don't care, which is an even bigger blessing because they're like, yeah, whatever. That's actually a gift to give them, right? That they don't take any of that. And then trying to find peace and love for your parents who are incredible people because they made a sacrifice to come here, but are deeply flawed. Like supremely flawed.
Because you said...
And nobody cares except you about that journey. And I think like Asians go through it, South Asians go through it, and I think anybody, like a lot of people actually, I think they can visualize this problem.
Because you've been pretty open about how your dad pushed and beat you when you were younger. You know, how much of your success would you attribute to this relationship?
A lot. A lot. My dad was a brilliant guy who had no ability to apply it. Can you imagine an incredibly, incredibly smart person where you move with your wife to a country where only you know the language, where you have tremendous potential, and you're like, I give it all up, and then you just imprint all of that pressure on your kids? I don't think that I am selfless enough to do that. How do you look at two kids and then eventually a third and say, I'm going to put my entire life into you and I'm going to bet that you're going to make all these sacrifices justifiable? So I have tremendous love and respect for that. But then there are things that are just, you know, he crossed the line a bunch of times. That's not cool. There's a duality in that, and I just have to accept it, and he's passed away. So the harder part is now to deal with, you know, my mom, because she was complicit. What do you do when you're just sitting around? Like, you know, she wasn't playing Angry Birds when this was happening, right? She saw it happening. But then I have to find love for her and compassion for her and care because she made the same sacrifices and she also suffered. So these are these complex kind of like interpersonal dynamics. They are the baggage that you bring forward into adult life that will dictate, I think, a lot of your real happiness. And then there's just no title, money, job that'll ever do that.
Okay.
It's like that is the biggest lie. And the problem is, like, you know, like educational institutions in a certain way, they sell the lie, right? They're like, this is your on-ramp to everything you've been told is what you want. But it's not really true.
So I want to give a quote actually from you of 3 years ago. So universities have become overbought luxury goods that exploit exclusivity, exclusion, and judgment to drive up revenues and endowment. You know, do you still mean this? And is there hope for us here?
I 100% mean it. That is even more true today.
What can be done? What is the different path to take?
Nothing. You have to just be eyes wide open. I think that these schools will destroy themselves over time.
But then you will, you know, come and speak at the school.
Look, think about this. I'm going to say something. I come to this school not because I have a lot of respect for the concrete edifice in which you sit, but I have a tremendous amount of respect and empathy for all of you guys that are sitting here. Yeah, you can clap at that. Clap at yourselves. You guys are awesome. Because I bet you, every single one of you, the reason you're here is in the back of your mind, there's like 1 or 2% that's like, shit, he said it and I was thinking it. And the reason why it's important for me to say these things is so that you go forward in your own life and just be a little bit more inquisitive from first principles about all of these artificial constructs. You have to take advantage of them. I was in no position to say no to the University of Waterloo when they gave me an acceptance. I played by the rules, but I think it's important to ask the why questions. You know, what about this? What about that? Why is it like this? So what I would say is at the extreme, you know, just as a thought exercise, purely thought exercise, no judgment. Do you think, who do you think was the most talented class at Harvard ever? And I'll give you 3 groups. 1935, 1975, 2025. I would bet that the most industrious entrepreneurial class was the 1930s class. And I bet the most predictable class is the 2025 class. Is it their fault? No. But when you start to play these extreme status games, you at some point have a choice, which is, am I going to give up who I am to play this game and get that prize or not? And all of these games become very extreme. Varsity Blues exposed how extreme these things can get. People making $100 million contributions to get their kids into school. It's extreme. And then these schools feel this tremendous sense of guilt. So then what do they try to do? They try to do things like, basically like, amplify certain minorities, but then they end up discriminating other minorities, and the whole thing has to go to the Supreme Court. How crazy is all of that? That is nuts. It makes no sense. So go to whatever school you can get into because you want to preserve the optionality of getting into the best school you can. But I would just keep in the back of your mind that this is a game that you probably don't want to play the first chance you have a choice.
And I want to dig a little bit into this idea of mimetic theory by René Girard. Can you give us a brief explanation on this and why you think it's relevant today?
If you took two 5-year-olds and you put them here, and you put them in a room full of toys, they would independently play. If you put them in a room with one toy, they would fight over that toy. And I think what he saw is that human beings are very subtly influenced to want things that other people want. And that's what creates this inexorable conflict between people, which is that you start wanting totally different things, and over time or in certain contexts, you start competing over extremely scarce resources that, again, you are told by yet other people are critically important. And then in that, there's all of this conflict that you only get rid of by essentially vanquishing the other person. He calls it scapegoating, but in biblical theory, as an example, it's described as crucifixion or killing, sacrifice. So that's the dynamic that humans live in, where we don't know what we want, we see what other people want, and we're like, yeah, I want that. And it causes enormous amounts of pain and suffering because you go and you seek that thing, only to find out eventually over time that that thing doesn't matter. But along the way, people get canceled, they get hurt, they get betrayed. And that's what he encapsulated in a philosophy. And it's unbelievably precise, I think, in terms of how it describes how certain products are engineered. I think Facebook was a very classic one that took advantage of it. We did. I think Instagram plays on that theme a lot. TikTok less so. Any actually good social media algorithm is very mimetic in its behavior and how it's designed and architected. Fashion is mimetic. Promotions are mimetic. Elite university admissions are mimetic.
Yeah, got it.
There's a lot of things in the offline world that this philosophy describes, I think, really well.
And then do you use that for your kind of investing? Do you kind of look through that prism in the way you make your investments?
It's just a way of understanding how the world works. I think that my concept of how I try to look at the world definitely changes, ebbs and flows. I'm always reweighting different things in different moments. Like right now, I think the most important thing that matters is liquidity. It's an order of magnitude more important than anything else. And right now, the United States is sucking liquidity out of the financial system. And you can just see that. You can go to the St. Louis Fed publishes this Fed data, and you can look at like M2 money supply, and it's just like, and as you see that, and then rates are like this. And so volatility always falls. And so I'm just sort of that's really the overarching dynamic right now for me in terms of what's going to happen in the world. A very complicated, choppy moment.
So then I guess if you're in the shoes of the people here, where would you focus next 5 to 10 years?
So I think that you have to look at things that involve atoms, because I think atoms is a world that AI touches last, I guess. So in terms of atoms, any atoms-based business, I think has huge differentiation. And it's funny because like I said, like I was making fun, like bread is atoms-based, but it's not necessarily that kind of stuff. But in climate change, there's a lot of businesses that are about manipulating atoms. I think a lot of things in energy generally are about manipulating atoms. Life sciences are about manipulating atoms. There, you can use the best of all the bits, so all the AI tools that are available to you, without it destroying your ability to do something. Otherwise, I would learn how to use these picks and shovels. Like, it's like you guys are in a Cambrian moment. You've been given fire. You've been given, a spear, a stick. You got to go hunt now. And so I would learn these tools. If you want to be in software, I would be very careful. I would keep the team very, very small. I would keep the amount of money extremely small. And I would try to disrupt somebody who's big and bulky and don't know what they're doing. But otherwise, I would focus on atoms, any kind of atoms-based business.
So a report a couple of years ago quoted privately his contemporaries asked, is he one of the savviest investors of his generation or merely the most cynical? Which would you say this is?
Who was that about?
About you.
Oh, that was about me? Yeah, I mean, look, I think I'm like any other person that's in the arena, which is I take a lot of shots on goal. I think there are moments where I really get things right. And there are some moments where I've gotten things gargantuanly right. But then there are moments where I've gotten things gargantuanly wrong. So I don't know, time will really tell where the dial is, but I vacillate between those two extremes for sure. I'm okay with that.
And then what is your definition of a successful investment?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I think I care that every time I do something, there's like 98% of it which is very boring, which is about mapping it into a model and blah, blah, blah. Then there's 2% where I allow myself to dream. If this thing works, could it do X, Y, and Z? And I would like to have more of those moments. I have very few of those. Right now, most of my wins are in this area. I think Facebook was kind of one over here. But other than that, I haven't really tasted that since then. I would like a little bit more of those. Those are like the real, like, earth-shattering, groundbreaking, move the world. I thought Bitcoin was going to be one of those things, but it's kind of disappointed.
Because it was regulated out of existence? Or?
No, just because it's just turned out to be a speculative tool that, works and is really interesting in loose monetary conditions and just becomes basically a, yet another thing in a moment like today.
So you've also said in the past that since leaving Facebook, you haven't worked with any consumer companies. Like, why is that? And then how do you see...
That's not exactly true. You may be able to guess based on my clothing on the All In podcast, but I cannot comment on anything that I may or may not have done.
Some good cashmere. And then, how do you see social networks and the creator economy developing moving forward?
I think the creator economy is ginormously important. So I think all that value, if you think about it, like the Facebooks and the Googles of the world will give way to all their distribution power to humans. Mr. Beast, the Kardashians, and they are the best examples of disrupting Facebook, Google, Snapchat. Why? So I met this gentleman who was helping, I may get this wrong, Kylie Jenner, I think, launch a tequila business or something like that. Is it right? Do you guys drink this tequila business?
I think Kendall's tequila.
Kendall Jenner, thank you. She supercharges that company through her own distribution. She's like, hey folks, buy my tequila. Then there's Logan Paul and KSI who have this energy drink called Prime. Have any of you guys tried Prime? Some of you, yeah. That business is $1 billion business in its second full year of operations. They're just able to push that through their own social media channels. So these are businesses that exist. Jimmy Donaldson, Mr. Beast, he has a chocolate bar, snacks, cookies, cereals business called Feastables. All of those businesses are less than a year old, They were all launched by these guys promoting these products off their own distribution. Not a dollar of it was paid to Google, Facebook, Amazon, any of these ad-based companies. So I think the creator economy basically replaces the entire market cap that's associated to the advertising portions of these companies, because you don't need those companies anymore. In fact, it's the opposite. YouTube needs Jimmy Donaldson, right? Because that's 377 odd million followers. They need, YouTube needs, what is the name of the, I'm gonna get it wrong, there's like a Bollywood music channel on YouTube. T-Series. They need T-Series. T-Series doesn't need YouTube. And so the thing is flipping constantly.
But then you yourself are now a creator. You know, you did
Totally.
you did a talk at Stanford a few years ago, and then over like COVID, you kind of went into the stratosphere.
Totally.
And, like, you know, is the fame worth it? And what is the price of this fame that you've gathered to yourself?
I mean, no, but I do like the idea of being able to say what I think and being able to shape at the very small margins how people think about certain things. I mean, I know who listens to our podcast. I know who reads, you know, my annual letter or things, and I think it's important to have your ideas out in the world. And I'm not necessarily saying my ideas are the best or they're right, but they're mine, and I believe in them. And so I would like other people who are like-minded to be able to embrace those ideas and run with them. I don't have any particular intellectual ownership over it. So, you know, the podcast is a great way of getting your ideas out in the world. You know, the Substack is really good. I may do something on like using that Twitter subscribe thing. I don't know, or you know, whatever that thing is.
But then do these creators themselves, do they let you invest into them? You know, like Mr. Beast, is he going to let you in as an investor?
I can't comment on
anything. Okay, and then, you know, I want to talk about, you know, this idea of mistakes. And you have a good theory around, you know, how to do mistakes and how to approach this. And I think it'd be great to understand, you know, how you approach taking hits when you get out to base.
I think this is really important. I learned this in poker, but the GTO optimal way of playing poker. So
what is GTO?
Sorry, the game theory optimal. So like if you want to create like a Nash equilibrium in a system, right, where let's just say there's two actors in a system and each actor is indifferent to the action of the other person. That's like a Nash equilibrium, right? In poker, there is no Nash equilibrium really, because there's a lack of perfect information, and there's all kinds of nuanced thinking that goes into your decision versus somebody else's decision. Okay. So how do you make money in poker? And I'm going to answer your question. The best poker players in the world have reduced poker to a very simple equation, which is your mistakes minus my mistakes are greater than 0. Okay? And when you study that, that is actually formulaically the best path. If you start a company, your mistakes are the things that your competitors do, right? And then my mistakes are how quickly I iterate to getting the best product in the market. And you quickly realize I cannot control their mistakes, but I can control my mistakes. And so what should your goal always be? Your goal should be to get your error rate to 0. Now here's the counterintuitive thing. How do you do it? Well, people would think that you just don't do anything. And that's not it. You will get run over, because now that is not the path to a Nash equilibrium. So you have to massively try stuff. 1,000 things with very small consequences. And then when something works, you can try it with medium-sized consequences. And when that works, you can try something with large consequences. But if you just focus on your body of actions and just try as many of them as possible, that is the fastest way to get your error rate to 0. And then the market, the system, the competitor will do whatever they're going to do. You can't control that. That is why making mistakes is so important. And so many people cannot try. Let me take a different example. let's just say that you want to ask somebody out. Is the path to finding a boyfriend or girlfriend or partner asking nobody out? No, the path is that your error rate will be non-zero. You will have to ask somebody, get to know somebody. There may be pain in that rejection, but eventually your error rate will go to zero, right? Let's just say that you're applying for a job. Is the way to get the job to not apply to a job? No, you apply to 1,000 jobs and your error rate will eventually go to zero. So you just have to try and understand that there's learning in failure. And certain cultures don't do a good job of embracing it. Certain cultures do. The most important thing is to have friends that support you through that journey and they understand that's what you're doing.
You know, when you're talking about these kind of greats, you know, you say Phil Hellmuth in poker, Magnus Carlsen in chess, you talk about these guys playing orthogonally. Can you explain what you mean by that and then how you try to play in business orthogonally?
So I'll use a Druckenmiller example. Druckenmiller's perspective is the minute that you think something is interesting, the first thing you should do is just initiate a small position. And he said there's nothing like losing a small amount of money or a medium-sized amount of money to wake you up and want you to do your job well. He embraces this idea that the only way you're going to learn and get your error rate to zero is by making mistakes. If you look at Magnus Carlsen, he has basically every formulaic opening down to a science, but where he excels is in the mid-game, and then he just destroys in the end game. But that's because he has tried so many times. I mean, there was a funny moment Magnus had, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago, where he completely misclicked in the mid-game, and like 4 moves later, he was destroyed in online. He threw his fucking chair, and he threw the mouse. You know, so it's kind of a funny example, but he makes enormous blunders. He has made enormous blunders in his career. He's taken some really crazy lines. Phil Hellmuth is the same way. He is exceptionally good. If you play with Phil Hellmuth, he remembers every hand he's ever played of any consequence. He's 57 years old, going back till he was 21 years old. He can recount it. He has his photographic memory, but he has made some ginormous blunders.
So if we map that onto you.
So in business, you have to be able to upfront ask yourself really honestly and write it down. What am I trying to prove by doing this thing? Am I proving that I'm betting on this person's ingenuity? Am I proving that this technological thing is better than that? Am I trying to prove that our financial analysis is better? Whatever it is, write it down. You make the bet, you measure it, and you hold yourself accountable to it. And then you need to do that thousands of times. And then people say, oh, well, you know, I don't have any money, I can't do this. And the answer is, that's not true. You know, in Robinhood, you can buy a fractional share for $1. The point is not the quantum of capital. The point is the process. And most people are so embarrassed by a process with small numbers that they don't even start. You know what I mean?
And then, you know, when you look at your success, like, what are the big blunders which you've had in this orthogonal career?
I mean, incredible number of blunders. I mean, where do I start? Like, you know, the number of deals that I missed, it's just incredible. The number of deals I didn't do because I thought I knew better, incredible. I've gotten sizing wrong. Then, you know, in the last couple of years where I focused too much on the external validation and the attention that I was getting. Huge blunder. Not selling more in November when I said on All In, if Elon and Jeff are selling, I should just sell everything. And I sold like fucking 1/8. An 1/8? Leaving 7/8 just to do the math for you? You know, it's so stupid. I was just really stupid. Some of my tweets were ginormous blunders. Ginormous. Yeah, but you know, you live and learn. And I'm trying to get my error rate to 0.
Has it been improving?
Yeah, in some realms. I think personally I'm really happy with my progress.
So you no longer look for the external validation?
No, I still do. This is an impossible task. You know, who gets there? The Buddha. You know, how did he get there? He attained Nibbana. I mean, I'm not on a path to attain Nibbana. I am just rationalizing that, I, like most humans, will still seek external validation that will cause me pain and suffering. You just try to minimize it.
And then you think about your career, like how much would you attribute your success to luck and how much to skill?
It's probably like 70, 80%. I was definitely very lucky. 20% I was very prepared. I don't think I'm that much smarter than certain people. I have specific strengths that play well to the job that I do. But if I go all the way back, honestly, I'd give 98% to my parents for emigrating and giving up their lives. I mean, I'd be, fucking Rajput at the corner if I was back in Sri Lanka. You know what I mean? Hello? I mean, look at me now. It's crazy. And I'll be honest with you, if I look at my family, I'd be probably really overweight. I would not have good health. Like, of my 17 aunts and uncles, 12 of them have diabetes. 2 of them have died of cancer. 1 of them died of diabetes complications. A couple of amputations, cataracts. A bunch of alcoholics. I mean, no fucking thanks. So I'm not sure that I was better than them. I would have ended up some version of that. So I don't know, 98%, my parents just said, okay, we're doing this thing. And they had to scratch and claw. So that's a huge portion, I think. So I want them to make sure that, so I would say, I don't know, 80% them, 19% luck, 1% me.
Good. And then, you've said balance is dumb. It will limit you.
That's stupid.
Balance is stupid or balance is?
It's dumb. Stupid.
Yeah, stupid.
Yeah.
So
That's the same word.
Yeah, sorry.
Zen, come on.
Sorry, missed that one. So, how do you advise us to kind of make the most of ourselves within that not being balanced perspective?
And see, this is not going to make sense to you guys because you're young. You should not spend time with your kids because it's like the socially acceptable thing to do. You'd be spending time with your kids because they're like really fucking cool and they're fun to hang out with and spend time with and, screw around with. You shouldn't be, spending time with your spouse or partner because you've allocated it on a calendar. It should be the thing that gives you joy and energy, where you're like, I'm looking forward to this moment. I love it. There are weeks where I'm working 15, 16 hours a day. I love it. There are weeks where I work 5 or 6 hours a day. There are weeks where I work 2 hours a day. There are weeks where I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it for my friends who may hear this, but I'll go on a poker solver and I'll run through a bunch of scenarios so I can run them over on Thursdays. Then there are weekends where I call my ex-wife, who I have a beautiful relationship with, she's an incredible person, and I say, can you swap this weekend? Because I'm actually going away for the weekend to do something totally fun, and she has to, take care of the kids, and she's willing to do it. So I really live in this idea of fuck balance. That is that's another stupid Western shibboleth that doesn't make any sense.
And then, you had obviously relatively complicated upbringing. How do you now take that and then focus on your kids moving forward? How do you pass that on?
No, you have to firewall your kids from all that stuff. I make fun of it. My kids, I'll start and then they'll be like, okay, we get it. You were beat as a child. It was really cold. You had no shoes. It took you 3 miles to get to school, uphill, but we get it. But it's because I don't want them to deal with the crap that I dealt with. For them, it should be a joke because it should be so beyond the pale that if they ever even sniffed a degree of it, they should say, hold on a second, this is completely inappropriate. But how do you do that? By I'm not going to martyr myself in front of my children.
But then how will you kind of instill a drive in them moving forward, do you think?
That's totally different. I don't think I can. And I think that, in fact, this, for them, is way harder than what I had. And so, it's much more conscious about creating boundary conditions for them to kind of find their own way. Simple things make a huge difference for kids when they have highfalutin parents. Not talking about work, not making them sit there at some of these dinners where it's XYZ muckety-muck person, where they can just be a kid, where they can get in trouble and it's okay. Like, that stuff is really important. Again, very counterintuitive. My son was on behavioral parole last week because he made a joke. And the joke was inappropriate. It was to his friends. But then that joke affected another person. And I was like, God, I'm so happy this happened to him. And the punishment for him was that they all build up to go on a trip to Washington, D.C. in grade 8. And his punishment was that he wasn't allowed to go. Can you imagine, like, the whole class goes and then you stay behind? It must be really soul-crushing. And so I said, okay, you know what? Listen, you're going to shadow me for 2 days. But, like, you need to be on. I'm on. These are 12-hour days when we're traveling. One in LA, then one in New York. And here's this kid, sweet little kid, and like tattered running shoes, but like khakis and an odd-fitting dress shirt, sitting in these meetings with banks and not falling asleep. And I was like, bro, I'm so proud of you for just being in the grind. So like, I try to create very normal moments where there's nothing fancy. It's just normalcy, and you got to see what everybody else is doing. And the people that I had these meetings with were very kind to let me do it. And it was great. So I don't know, I try to do these little things, but the big thing that happened was like he was treated very normally and he understands consequences, and I think more of that stuff is going to be important. But I don't know. Or I'll beat him. All else fails. You got to be able to laugh at it, man. Zan, you get really uncomfortable when I make these jokes. It's okay, it's a joke. I'm not going to beat them.
Okay. So, any kind of final advice? You've got a pretty big group of people here. Everyone is, undergrads, PhDs, grad students. What would you do?
I'm going to start a little accelerator. We'll announce it soon. I would encourage you to apply if you and a partner want to come and hack away at something using these tools and try to go after something. I think that'd be a really good use of your time. Otherwise, find a good group of friends that allow you to just not be in this hamster wheel.
Nice, thank you so much. Now, some questions. I think we've got time for questions.
Absolutely, if you guys want to ask questions. Happy to also take photos afterwards if you want. It's a joke.
Hello.
Any questions?
Hey, Chamath. My name is Ben Davis. Big fan of the pod.
Say your name.
Ben Davis.
Ben Davis. I don't believe that's your name.
I remember an interview you did with Barry Ritholtz on Masters in Business on Bloomberg, and you gave capital to people who weren't in kind of traditional, like, top 20 schools, all the people who end up working in finance. Is there preliminary numbers on how they're doing with that capital you gave them? I haven't been able to find anything on the back end of how they perform.
Yeah, this is this emerging managers thing. They did well. Although, to be very honest with you, it was, in year one, we broke even. In year one was 2021. In year two, we crushed it, like 18, 19% up. But it was really one person, and that strategy was unsustainable. That person took huge macro swing bets, and he just nailed it. And he made up for all the losses and everything, and then we were up because of all of that. And then we decided that we need to be much more circumspect in how we do this business, because it's really, really tough to make that business work at those small amounts of capital. But it was a great learning experience, and we put a lot of people into business, which I think has been great. Gave them a track record, stuff like that. Thank you.
Hey Chamath, I'm Ameya. Very nice to see you here. Not too long ago, in a similar event across the bay, you had said that there are about 150 white men who rule the world, and you're trying to get a foothold in that circle. I just want to know, do you still hold that opinion, and are you part of that circle now?
Well, both can't be true. No, I mean, if I could clarify that as I've learned about this, look, I think that there's a lot of institutional cruft that does dictate a lot of how the world works. And I think it's really important for all of you guys to be open-minded enough to say, okay, even though that's how it worked, even if I benefited from it, we're better off changing it for the future. There's just too many smart, young, capable people that are never going to get a shot to do the right things. So I guess my answer would be that maybe it's like 300 or 400 people, but there are a handful of people that have oversized influence on how everything happens after they make a decision. And no, by no means am I anywhere near that. But I have a clearer sense of how those systems work. And I definitely think in moments, there's been a handful of us that have been able to change it by half a degree here or there. And so I have hope, but by no means is it as democratic as it should be.
Thanks. I had two questions. I wanted to ask, so why do you give these talks at, for example, GSB or Wharton or Berkeley? And then two, is there something in particular that you're optimizing for through your investments? I asked a similar question to Freeberg, so I'm interested in hearing what you have to say.
I feel like I'm more similar to you than I'm similar to maybe a lot of the people that I spend time with. So I like being in my native environment where you can kind of like let your hair down, speak kind of candidly, and where you're open enough to not re-underwrite all these decisions you've already made. Because when you're 35 or 40, you live in the context of those lived decisions. So I really like it. I like talking to young folks. And then what's the second question?
Is there something you're trying to optimize for, through social capital?
No, but I'm trying to optimize for my learning. I really would like to minimize the amount of time I spend worrying what everybody else thinks, because I'm just happier, and then I'm more content doing things that are not measurable by other people. My daughter had ACL surgery on Wednesday, and I took care of her for the first 3 days, and the best thing about it was she set up an alert on my phone, which was like turns everybody off except her on. And so she was in the main floor. She's like 12. And we took these couches and we made like a little pod. And she called like 5 or 6 times. And it was amazing because like I was up like this, right? And I just felt like that's been my greatest accomplishment of 2023. The sensation that I was able to give my daughter, that I was there for her. I know that sounds like nothing to you, which it should, by the way, because that's not an important thing for you. But man, like that gave me huge validation. So to be honest, like I am trying to live my life in those measurable characteristics that are not measurable by you. So social capital is a way for me to just take a bunch of shots on goal, reduce my error rate so that I can have more of those moments and actually really live it.
Thanks.
Could be here a while.
Do you guys want to like, I know this is like, I didn't go to Berkeley, but maybe like if you want to just stand in a line, then sir, the microphone can just go back. It would be the most expeditious way for folks. You want to do that? Am I a genius or what, guys? 5% for this idea. The AI just put him out of a job.
Hi, Chamath. My name is Ayush. Thank you for your time. It's totally worth missing a class. You mentioned a lot about how technology is quickly evolving, which is true. But how do you, as an investor or as an entrepreneur, assess the potential of new technology like AI, blockchain? I mean, when it was coming out.
I make
things
bets.
like that.
I find young people and I make bets. 500K here, $1 million there, and just observe. And it's amazing what you'll learn.
What are you looking for? What are you looking to see?
I'm looking for people that are gritty and resilient. I don't particularly care about the idea. I've learned enough that the idea is going to change 1,000 times. It's the person. Like, you're really putting that person into a moment where they can explore themselves and come out the other end of it. That's what's so amazing about entrepreneurship. It is a journey of self-exploration.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, my name is Sanchit. I had a question regarding kind of similar to
Big guns, bro. Those are like, what's a gun?
Thank you. So small and large.
Work out? You work out. I'm saying.
Yes, sir. So small and large companies. So small companies, you've seen, you've talked about, investing in atoms, things that, in your experience, what companies, with your experience, are you now not investing in because you've realized that that's
Pass. Uninvestable.
As it relates to AI?
Uninvestable. Uninvestable.
And from the same standpoint, larger companies, you said, you want to disrupt larger companies, but what kinds of organizations do you think will be?
There's a company, for example, called Teleperformance, which is like a French Euronext listed business. It's like $8 billion of revenue, 12 billion in market cap, 600 million in net income. It does like call center support with people. Unfortunately, that's not going to exist in 3 years.
What kind of companies do you think which have massive amounts of high quality data will be able to utilize the next wave of using their data for?
I don't have very many good examples, but like Sabre is an example. So like the idea would be to be long Sabre, short the travel stocks. Ideally try to buy Sabre. I don't know. I'm very much learning, but you can figure out where the middlemen are. Those middlemen are toast. It's not like this is exactly where, those kinds of companies just die on a vine.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Charles, and given that a lot of students these days, like even the high school students, use ChatGPT, I think, or I hypothesize that there will be a decreased level of thinking and writing among general population. So I just wanted to get your opinion on how education will shape or will be shaped with the development of AI and machine learning.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that in all these advents of tools, the way in which humans thought changed. And so you can actually go back and really understand, using brain studies, that the way that we process information has been changing. All the way down to the size of the shape of certain aspects of our brain have changed over time. And so there's an anthropological dynamic here that I think is important. We will adapt to these things. I think you're absolutely right that we will think differently as a result of them. But then, much like using a computer, you become more efficient and effective at thinking about much broader scale issues because now they're tractable by a smaller number of human beings. So this is what I mean by we're in this crazy moment where we've been using a hoe and a horse and a plow to till the field, and all of a sudden this John Deere tractor shows up and we're just like, what do we do? I would just encourage you to keep that in mind, that that's the moment we're in.
Chamath, my name is Anojan. I'm also a Sri Lankan Canadian refugee engineer, so your story really relates to me.
Be related.
Maybe, I don't know. I went to U of T though, so we might have.
I've always wanted a brother.
I don't know. So I guess my question to you is, how did you and how do you continue to stay motivated and driven as you move up through society or try to enter that chamber of 150 or whatever you called it?
Well, I mean, honestly, I give you a funny answer, but look, you will fall in love more and more with the things that you're good at. So the minute you get good at something, you will love it. And then you will want to be better at that thing. And then it'll just keep you working. It's not the other way around. It's not like you wake up one day and saying, I love X. Let me go get good at that. I mean, there are those things, but those are never the things you're good at. It's like, I mean, we'd all wake up, I really love basketball. Well, guess what? None of us are going to be, in the NBA. But it's more that when you start to do something and get good at it, it's a crazy positive feedback loop. That's what keeps me going. So I'm a part of a very, simple system. That's what you have to find. You just have to get like some wins under your belt. Doing anything, it almost doesn't matter. I'll see you at home.
Hey Chamath, how's it going? My name is Ricky. My question was...
That's not your real name.
It's not. You're actually right.
What is your real name?
It's Shithage.
Shivage?
Yeah, Shithage, yeah.
Yeah, great.
Shithage, yeah. Also from Canada. My question actually has to do with brain drain, and you kind of talk about this concept a little bit, especially as it relates to brain drain to the US, right? It's still the #1 destination. There was a brief moment where entrepreneurs were sort of going back and starting these tech companies and other companies in their home countries, but now with the uncertainty, it's sort of, moving back to US dominance there. Do you think that's going to continue? Do you think that's going to change? How do you see that shape the economy? And on a slightly related note, do you, ever feel, not necessarily an obligation, but do you feel like you invest back in like Canadian startups or something like that as a way to, pay it forward?
I give a lot of money to the University of Waterloo, and I sponsor a bunch of stuff there, but other than that, I do nothing. I do think that we are in a massive, inexorable economic war between us and China, and in that we are going to nearshore every imaginable thing possible. And so another business actually opportunity for you guys is to literally find something that's happening in China and rebuild it either domestically in the United States, particularly in an area where you can get tax incentives, or nearshore, which would be Mexico or Central America. And the reason is because we're going to want to preserve complete optionality with China, and the only way to do that is to not be reliant on them. So this nearshoring thing is going to be a bigger and bigger dynamic, and so there'll be a lot of people I think that could stay here, but also go to Canada, go to Mexico, go to Central America. But if you're going to do it, what I would encourage you to do is find a business that exists in China and rebuild it here, because the tax incentives and otherwise will make it almost a no-brainer. And it's probably one of the U.S.'s most important strategic economic priorities.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, Chamath. I'm Albert. I have a bit of a fun one for you. I know you take your physical health super seriously. I just wanted to know, how much do you bench?
Hey, you look pretty jacked too, bro.
Thank you. Not like him, but I just wanted to know, how much do you bench?
Oh, I have a very weak bench. I don't know, like a plate. It's not what I do to work out.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Hey Chamath, thanks for taking the time. I know you're a really early employee at Facebook, and I was just wondering if you had any advice for early startup employees, both to get the most out of it and also help the most for the company.
You got to if you're going to join as an employee, you have to pick the thing that's growing the fastest, because that's the only way for you to really figure out what the next lily pad is going to be. I think it's very difficult to get stuck in a crappy company because it can take the life out of wanting to be in a startup. Because startups are not glamorous. They're not glorious things. And when things don't work, it's really hard. So independent of anything else, I really think almost like if your first job, you're like, I want to go work at a startup, find the thing that's growing, take whatever job they'll give you, and then find your co-founders. Just do that.
Hey Chamath, my name is Aditya. First off, thank you so much for this talk. I did want to ask you a question. So I know around last year, you had like an interview with ESPN, which didn't exactly go the best. Today, you talked a lot about external validation, making mistakes.
Wait, which one didn't go well? I had many crappy ones, but which one? ESPN?
I think it was the one about the Uyghur Muslims one.
No, that was on our podcast. That was on our podcast.
Oh, that was on your podcast? Okay, sorry. Might have got that mixed up. But how do you deal with that media backlash and cancel culture in general when it's on such a large scale?
Just learn and you just move on. There's nothing to do. Got to close your phone, hang out with your kids, turn your phone back on 3 days later, and pretend it didn't happen. What are you supposed to do, you know? You find contrition, but you just got to move on. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody. The question isn't that. The question is, how do you bounce back from it? And then the question as the observer is, are you going to judge? Because the observer that judges will be judged one day. That's a complicated thing for you to be a part of.
Got it. Thank you.
Hey Chamath, my name is Sritej. I too bench a plate, so I can now claim I bench as much as Chamath, which is pretty cool. Question for you is, at the year-end review of the All In Pod, you called out pod shops as, you know, your winners for the investors of 2022. Do you think that model is going to continue, like winning over time, attracting LP returns, and do you think, as someone that wants to be an investor, that is the right model to enter?
It's a great place to go to. I think it's very difficult they work in high vol environments. And last year we had huge volatility. They printed so much money. I think the problem is that when rates go up, vol gets crushed. So it's not clear to me that their model makes the most money in a low volatility environment. But they are attracting the smartest people in the world in finance right now because they, frankly, have the ability to pay the most. So if you're trying to break into finance, I would really encourage you to go to those places. The Jane Streets of the world, to the Citadels, Millenniums. If you can get a job at one of those places because that's what you're interested in, there's no better place to cut your teeth, I think.
Awesome. That's the plan. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, Chamath. My name's Brian. First, thanks for coming today. And my question is, if there was a student here that was going to set out and build a conglomerate in the physical world like LVMH or Fanatics, what advice would you give him or her?
I think you have to start extremely, extremely, extremely small. Like if you understand the Bernard Arnault story, the thing that is you can't miss is he went to the most elite school in France. He was part of as close to the landed gentry as you can get in France. His father was well known, and Bernard Arnault is an incredible entrepreneur, but was able to buy at the courthouse steps a bankrupt company, supermarket chain, that had within it Christian Dior. And that's how LVMH really started. And then fast forward several years later where he was able to engineer an incredibly divisive coup to get a hold of Louis Vuitton MO at Hennessy. That's probably not going to be any of our paths because we're not going to have the ability to be bumping up and elbow to elbow with the French aristocracy and banking culture that would allow them to backstop a deal like that and sell it to you, by the way, for 1 franc. 1 French franc is what he bought Christian Dior for. That sits on top of connections. But then it's phenomenal execution, right? So he's a brilliant genius that took everything and then made it infinitely more. But for the rest of us that don't have that, you have to just start small. And this is where I think people get very confused by compounding. Like, do you know how much you get if you take a penny and double it every day for 31 days?
Like, I think somewhere in the billions.
10.7 million.
10.7 million.
31 days. So compounding is this incredible thing. The problem is instead of 31 days, you have to think about things in 31 years. But if you're going to build something in the physical world, it is really key to start small. And there are these incredible long-tail brands that exist. And then if you can attach it to some form of distribution where you can get increased exposure. I say this to you because I find this very fascinating, this idea.
Yeah, like to your point earlier, my friend and I are going to set out to build like a creator venture studio to partner with like mid-sized creators and use their distribution to to essentially like cut out the marketing costs that traditional CPG brands like P&G have to spend.
But the key in doing that, though, quite honestly, is to then replace those CPG brands with your own.
Yeah, we plan to create like, the physical products.
Yeah. I think it makes sense. Good luck.
Hey, Chamath. My name's Alpin. I noticed that when I listen to your All-In podcast and sort of other people at your level, there's so much discussion of macro. So if I were to survey like 10 Chamaths randomly, how many of them would be sort of pondering macro level things? Wow, really? And do you think that has to do with the fact that as you get to the level where you're grappling with markets instead of individual companies, you kind of are forced to do it? Or
yeah,
I see.
Yeah, and like it's you really need to understand liquidity, which is all central bank driven. Well, 90% central bank driven, and oddly the U.S. government now 10%. But that's an abnormality. It should really just be central banks, and they control money flows, and so it really dictates the ebb and the flow of the market in a more profound way than I realize. I mean, this is sort of new thinking for me. So I wouldn't have said 10 out of 10 even a year ago. But I think if you do your job well, it's 10 out of 10.
To follow up on the point on compounding, do you think that's a worthwhile sense to build early on, or is it just something you do as it comes?
Yeah, I think learning it, because it's the one thing that allows you to toil in obscurity for a long period of time without getting tilted by what everybody else around you is accomplishing. It's the only thing, right? You're going to look at a small growth rate. Somebody else is like, oh, I just graduated from law school. Oh, I just made partner or whatever. Oh, I got into med school. I'm a doctor. And you're like, I'm building this product. It's growing at 1%. So unless you understand compounding, you're going to give up.
Thank you.
Hey, Chamath. My name's Skylar. I think your story resonated a lot because I'm also Canadian. I wanted to ask more about what you talked about with atoms. I'm really interested in space exploration. I'm really just curious, like, what sort of problems do you think should be solved in the next couple of decades in space exploration?
I think we need a completely different form of propulsion. Whether it's LOX or methalox, these are very rudimentary, highly inefficient systems. We have these argon Hall thrusters that SpaceX just developed, which I think are pretty phenomenally interesting. The problem is that the boundary conditions of using those efficiently are pretty limited as well. If we actually think about ourselves as multiplanetary, you have some really important issues of like, well, how the hell do you get back? Right? So that's a propulsion issue, but it's also a manufacturing issue. So things like the 3D printability and the manufacturability of these systems, so that if we're going to send 100 of these Starship Heavies out to Mars, what are we putting inside of it? That when we get there, we can take out and put into some usable form to print everything we need, to make everything we need, to generate the potable water, and then to generate the propulsion to get us back. So those are the kinds of ideas that I think are really, really important. Propulsion and manufacturing in these kinds of like highly complicated environments. Very much unsolved problems, I think.
And as a quick follow-up, how would you evaluate if these future space companies are investable or not?
We have a team of people that we rely on that are PhDs and postdocs that are littered across like Slack, Stanford, Xerox PARC, wherever. Actually, a couple guys here at Berkeley. And we call them, and they help us do sort of technical diligence, viability. But then we ultimately are just kind of taking these big flyers on people and just seeing whether they can pull something off.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Chamath. Nice to meet you. My name is Neeraj. My question is regarding trying small things and trying them really rapidly that you talked about. What I've been noticing in the past year is every idea that I think is a good one and I start trying it, in a few months I see someone else has already come out with it. So it made me realize maybe my ideas are not big enough, but with the resource constraints that I have and the time constraints that I have, what would you advise I do that I can push myself to that point where I can start thinking bigger than what I'm doing right now?
this is going to sound very mean, so I don't mean it to sound, you can't have constraints. If you have a time constraint, that's like the opposite of, like, you have to be unbounded. This has to be the only thing. You're looking for success. You can't find that. You have to look for like traction and work. You got to love the grind of just like iterating. I will remind you that Google was the 13th search engine and Facebook was the 7th social network. So being first or being copied means nothing to the grinder. And it means everything to the one that's just looking to find success. You're not going to find it. So I don't mean to say that to be mean. I'm just telling you that you have to reprioritize what you're trying to do.
Thank you.
Hey, Chamath, I'm Pranav. Thanks for coming out and giving us your time. I believe you're still a prominent shareholder in Virgin Galactic Holdings?
No.
No, you're not? Not even indirectly?
No.
But either way, in 2019, you did make a big investment, and then you proceeded to say to CNBC that you believe that it was going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry. I wanted to get your rationale behind that statement and why you think that is.
So if you look at the amount of satellite access that has to happen over the next, call it 10 or 15 years, the amount of experimentation. So for example, when you run experiments for a drug, let's just take Humira. Humira is like a $25 billion drug. The FDA has said that when you run them in near zero gravity, it actually has very different properties, and so it will give you a totally new patent. So all of a sudden, every drug company, this is a $1 trillion industry, if their drugs are right at the tail end of actually expiring, the best thing that they can do is send up a rocket, redo the experiment up in near zero gravity, bring that compound down, refile the patent, and all of a sudden you have another 17 to 20 years on a $20 billion a year drug. So there are all kinds of random things that are possible in space that are economically value added. And so in a for-profit capitalist society, if you just enumerate a bunch of those things and add them up and discount them back, you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in yearly potential revenue, which I think is worth trillions of dollars of enterprise value for those that facilitate that.
Okay, so it's not just like a bunch of billionaires flying to space and coming back. It's
no, I think that's a very small part of it.
Okay,
but I think there will be a lot of that tourism. Yeah.
And do you think that tourism is going to be offered at scale to like people, like regular people, or?
Yeah, I think like with anything, look, when Elon first made the first Tesla Roadster, it was 210,000, I think. When we bought our first Model X's, they were 180 or 90,000, and now I saw that the Model 3 and the Model Y are now cheaper than the average car in America. So it's just a matter of perspective and time.
Hi, I'm Hanson. Recently I chatted with some people from an AI research organization, and they seemed to sort of be able to convince most of the crowd that they were doing useful or interesting work. But when I asked some more detailed questions, it seemed clear that they didn't have a focus, and they had recently sort of switched from one area to another following the trend. Right. And so I had sort of two related questions. So what are your general thoughts on the usefulness of sort of these like AI research or just research in general organizations? And also how do you sort of cut through the noise in terms of identifying which research or not, something which has a lot of hype like AI recently, which ones will be successful?
I mean, I think these research organizations are not that valuable. I'll tell you why. If you read the seminal paper on Transformers, Attention is All You Need, that was like a fart in an auditorium when it was launched, when it was published. I don't know if you read it, but when I read it, I've read it now probably 4 or 5 times, because every single time I'm like, man, this thing is such a nothing burger paper, right? I'm sure you thought that.
It's like plus 2 blue score.
Bro, it's crazy. Yeah. And if you looked at the folks that published it, it was like a smattering of a bunch of folks from Google and one random person from the outside. So it was never, it was so, in hindsight, was it organized AI research that caused this explosion? No. It was 6 guys, or guys and girls, I think there was a couple, who published this thing very randomly, that then another organization that had, was in the midst of flipping from nonprofit research organization to a for-profit company, embraced, this is OpenAI, and then the thing exploded. If you look at like the infighting or the tension between Google Brain and DeepMind for years, probably caused a lot of the most prolific things that they were developing to not really be released, or they went after certain projects that were really about showing the scale of their intellectual prowess. And now look what's happened. This for-profit company who is hacking together on a paper that even their own company didn't embrace, right? Because they were still working in a world of tensors. So to me, I'm not sure what these research organizations ultimately do. Software research, hardware research organizations, I think, are still really valuable, and they're measurable because they generate qualified IP that they out-license. SRI, Xerox PARC, I don't know if you saw, but they just merged. So those things are valuable. But yeah, I'm a little skeptical because the track record of what these folks have produced has been relatively unimpressive.
And then how do you, if you have time for the second question, how do you sort of cut through the noise in terms of, like maybe not a research organization, but...
It's too early, quite honestly. This is why, right now we're in the phase of dead ends. Many, many, many dead ends. So I think right now it's about massive amounts of experimentation, trying to get the error rate lower over time. So placing thousands of small bets. I think we're in the thousands of small bets moment.
Cool, thank you so much.
Hey, Chamath, thanks for spending time with us today.
First woman asking a question.
Woo! Yes. So my name is Pavitra. I'm a big fan of what I read this week, emails that I get. My question is, seems like you're in a place today where your definition of success is the time optionality you have. And tying it back to success of how you think about your investments, how has that changed over the course of from when you started? Because getting into the process, starting small is all great, but how do you build a conviction and confidence to keep going in that path?
Yeah, I think you have to be unafraid of being wrong, which means you have to either lie to your friends or be around people that won't judge you for being wrong. That's the only thing you can do. I was lucky where all of my friends were entrepreneurs, and so half this time they were also mocked and laughed. That's a huge advantage, actually. So I think it has to do with that whole loop. If people are telling you that what you're doing is not worthwhile, it's really easy to stop. But if people are like, they really support you genuinely as a person, it's really easy to keep going. I know that sounds so fucking trite and glib, but it really is that. I think it's that.
If you have a time for follow-up, how do you manage between being part of the world and consuming the news and learning all of that versus just focusing on your craft and getting your ideas out there? Just feels like that's a balance as well, right?
One feeds the other. I learn, I act, I learn. I want to publish things about what I'm learning so that other people can take what they will. Like my biggest problem right now is if you wanted to be educated about how the world works, it's basically impossible. And I'm not saying that I have a definitive view, but I have a view. And it'll allow you to have a reasonable jumping off point where you can go and say, 90% of what he said was stupid. That 10%, 5 of it is good, 5 of it is not so good or average. But that's a jumping off point. And I think that is what I enjoy, because eventually maybe there's some connection that we have on an idea, and you will say to me, hey, it's just Chamath at Gmail, so I mean, everybody knows what my email address is. Hey, I heard you speak at and I've had this so many times. Years later, and we find a way to work together. It's magical.
Hey, Chamath, Hassan Chima. So I had 2 questions. One, you've mentioned a lot on your podcast, right? Your support for solar. You've had some fiery debates with Friedberg. So I just wanted to understand, why are you so bullish on solar? and why are you so bearish on nuclear fusion and kind of the reasons for that? And then I had a second question, which I'll get to if we have time.
Nuclear fusion works today. It's called the sun. If you go outside and you look up, so let me ask you a question. Who is your most favorite relative? Father, mother, brother, sister, whatever. Pick somebody.
I don't know.
The one you love the most. I mean, you have somebody you love more than everybody else. Who is it?
Probably cousin, yeah. I mean.
A what, a cousin?
I guess.
Nobody loves their
I don't know,
cousins,
I
bro.
can't-
Cousins, what? That's like a stranger. I expected like father, mother, brother.
Okay, yeah, one of my uncles is pretty
What?
cool.
Okay, so it's not your mom or your dad. Okay, got it. Okay,
Well,
fine.
you said relative, you didn't say family. But anyways, go ahead.
I said family. I said family.
Of course. I mean, I love my mom and dad. I mean, it goes.
Okay,
goes
pick
without
one.
saying, But yeah, I mean, both my parents. I obviously.
You are the best. Okay,
Then
fine.
relative.
We're going to go with this example. Let's just say you had two choices for a nuclear fusion reactor. One that's all the way up over there in the sun, and you just shine it at a panel and it collects all the energy you need and puts it in a battery. Or two, it's under your parents' fucking bed. No, pick one.
I mean, obviously under the bed, right?
Why?
Well, so okay, so
What the hell? What if there's an accident? Your parents will be burnt to a crisp.
Okay.
Okay, so you hate your parents. Okay, let's go back to the uncle. What if it was your under your uncle's bed? Okay, how about this? Let me give you, okay. I would never put a nuclear reactor under my children's bed. So putting it in your home, to me, is like one of these really brain dead ideas because you're not considering the true go-to-market. Forget the fact it takes 30 years for approvals, even when you stick it 15 or 20 miles away, and it's encased by, or 500 miles away in the case of Diablo, and it's encased in miles and miles of concrete. Even that takes 30 years to approve. Now all of a sudden this idea is all this regulatory stuff is just going to melt away, and you're going to put this thing under your daughter's bed. Meanwhile, we've already solved fusion, it's in the sky, and you could just reallocate tens of billions of dollars. So I don't know. That's why I think it's just kind of a doesn't make sense argument.
Okay. And then just a second question. Obviously everyone on the pod is either, has invested it with Elon Musk or is friends with him at some level. Do you guys feel that it's very hard for you to objectively talk about him on the pod, given that, you all sort of have, either a relationship with him through investing or, being friends or just your overall positive opinion of him? Like just in terms of objectability on the pod? Or being objective on the pod?
Probably, but I
Musk?
don't think that's ever been a goal. Yeah, probably. He's incredible.
No doubt. I mean, I'm just saying.
No, I'm not even saying as a,
Yeah.
I don't care about his success because he was more successful, less successful. 15 years ago, he was really not as successful. He's a really good human being. He's funny. He's kind. He takes care of his friends. So, yeah, I'm pro Elon.
Hello, dictator. It's an honor to be in your presence. I don't know why I became so far away, so I'm going to get closer to the dictator. I'm Michael Yang, and you gave so much wisdom about the markets and life. I've messaged Jason before about asking for life wisdom from the pod, and it's always about the markets and topics, so it was really nice to hear some of that. And at the risk of making you repeat yourself, I was wondering, you were giving us advice as 30 something college students, but if your kids in 10 years or so, when they're 25 to 30, and God forbid if you weren't there and you had to write a letter or leave some sort of thing, what would you tell them to do and learn? What kind of people would you tell them to follow? And what kind of questions, perhaps most importantly, questions to ask themselves? What would you write in that letter for your kids?
There's a lot, so I'm not going to remember it all, but honestly, I think that I think I would like them to know that whatever they do, as long as they're proud of it, is great. I just really hope that they're good people that are kind to the people around them, and they're a really good friend, and that when they eventually end up in a relationship, that they give 100% of themselves into that relationship and have good kids. That's it.
Less so on the industries to pursue things to skills. It's all like, don't do the people thing.
Can I ask you a question? Do you know who the richest person was in 1965? Yes or no answer?
No.
Okay. Do you know who the richest person was in 2004?
Bill Gates?
Well, you're guessing. Do you know?
No.
Okay. What about the 17th richest person?
No idea.
You get the point? It doesn't fucking matter. There's a list of like 20 human beings that are known, which means that there have been 8 billion people that have lived on this earth. So there's 9.789999999 billion people that are never going to be remembered in a book. They're only going to be remembered by the generation that they raised. Do you know your great-great-grandfather's name?
No, I forgot.
Okay,
but I did learn.
Hold on, no, wait. Do you know your great-grandfather's name?
Yeah.
You know all of them?
They had like 12 sons during the Korean War, so I don't know like all of the names, but yeah, my grandfather's told me because I made a point to ask him before he was dying.
Amazing.
To get the history and the generation.
Amazing.
It has no value to me, but
I think you're quite rare that you even know their names.
Yeah. Yep.
The point I'm trying to is that we're not bad people. It's just that it's amazing how little some of these things really matter. You know what I mean? So what matters? Are you a kind person? Are you a good person? Do you open the door for the person in front of you? You know, you see somebody struggling, you help them out. Like these are things these are independent of class, money, all this bullshit. And I think that's not taught so well anymore. So I would make sure that they recognize that.
Hey Chamath, thanks a lot for coming here. My name is Sina. So I've been having some trouble reconciling two trends that to me seem kind of conflicting. So on one hand, we all know that AI has opened up a world of opportunity for innovation and startups. But on the other hand, tech as a whole is still struggling to recover from obstacles to capital availability and growth that are due to just external economic forces. So as an investor, I was wondering how you think successful AI startups are going to navigate these external forces.
2 or 3 person teams, very, very small amounts of money raised, using as much Copilot, automation, auto GPTs as possible.
What about?
And then so like that 50-person company is going to get rebuilt in a 5-person company or a 2-person company, and all that money that you save will be used to just cut the price. So like the canonical example, which I've said before, is Stripe will get rebuilt in a very, very small person team. And instead of all of the coordination costs and sales and marketing and go to market, they'll just charge 0 or 1 basis point on top of the rail fees. Hyper disruptive.
What about from like a customer perspective? So I know Sachs often talks about how a lot of companies are decreasing their spend on software. So
yeah, this is a great question. Customers don't matter.
So do you think?
Can I tell you why?
Okay.
Because in a world of auto GPTs, you have ruthless, unemotional decision making about what things you're going to be consuming. There won't be customers. There'll be auto GPTs consuming your thing. See, like think of like your favorite SaaS tool, Airtable. I don't know if you use Airtable. I've never used it. I don't know what it is. But what is Airtable? If you're a customer, I'm sure you have a point of view on it. But if it's just like an abstraction layer and a bunch of UI that like an auto GPT creates for you, and then behind it, there's 9 different ways of having like a vector database do the same thing, that's what it will do. I don't think customers exist anymore. Isn't that crazy? That's why 2 and 3 person teams, I think, can like totally disrupt 50 and 500 person companies.
But at the end of the day, I mean, investors need to invest their money. So is it just at this point changing the types of things that you're looking for instead of looking for the growth of the company? Are you more what are like?
Yeah,
the,
I'm definitely much more open-minded to like these very small checks, because before the thought was that that's an inscalable way to do business, but now I think that is the only way to do business for the foreseeable future.
And I've been asking a lot of follow-ups. So last point on this. So how do you think it's more difficult now for you to differentiate the players when there's less of a focus? Because on the past you could look at, this company has 10 million ARR, this one has 100 million ARR growing at 5%, the other one's growing at 20%. Easy to know which one's the winner. Now that there's less of a focus on the customers, less of the focus on the revenue and the other metrics, what do you look for now instead to look for which company is the winner at the end of the day?
I think it's like TCO, total cost of ownership. It's like if XYZ legacy company was doing it for $1 and you can do it for 2 cents, and you just expose yourself as APIs to the internet, and you just expect a whole bunch of autonomous robots to come and just consume your shit for $0.01 or 2 pennies. Why? Because that CFO and CEO are judged not by the fact that they let their employees choose Airtable versus this versus that. It's that they can get OpEx down 90%. Total, ruthless, unemotional seeking of cost savings. No more customers exist.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Hi, Chamath. My name is Timothy Daniel. I'm from Indonesia. And I have 2 separate questions for you. The first one is, building up on you mentioned about co-founders earlier. So what type of characteristics should one look for in a co-founder as opposed to your first early employees? Because at the end of the day, you want both very qualified persons, and to some sense, they will also get some share in the company.
It depends. Some people like 2 business people, some people like 2 technical people, some like one or the other. I don't think it matters that much. I think is that person gritty? Are they going to give up or not? That's it, man. You would be shocked at some of the people that make it and some of the people that fail. It's all grit. And it's not easy to judge it by, you can't judge a book by its cover. So you have to mentally exhaust them and just see how they react to it. Some people, it's just a nothing burger to them. And other people just shrivel up like a flower. And those people, unfortunately, aren't conditioned to face adversity and overcome it. Maybe they've been playing these status games too long, right? So they're used to the labels. So, yeah.
Okay, and my second question, we're living in a world with limited resources, and we see the rise of some emerging economies. And what's your investment thesis towards these emerging economies?
Long India, short China. China has a huge population problem. It's going to halve its population by 2100. Uninvestable. China is going to become an inward-facing economy that's uninvestable from outside capital. On top of all that, the capital controls, the currency controls, the inflows, very, very complicated. So China has to become a services-led, dynamic, internal consumption business economy. Whereas India is just dynamic. They just passed China, by the way, in terms of populace. I think last week, India is now the most populous country in the world. Democratic, messy, but awesome. And so it's kind of the tale of 2 massive superpowers there.
All right, thank you.
My name is Nadia. I'm a first-year MBA here. I have 2 comments and a question, and I'll try not to surprise you with so many follow-ups because there are people behind me too. Hey, yes, another woman on the line. My first comment is for Zan, to appreciate you for both navigating this conversation and the back-end work you might have had to do, but tangoing with Chamath, so thank you. And then there's no dig at you, Chamath, but this line experiment is challenging. But I think to come back to my actual question is, I thought it was so interesting that what made you pause on how you define success now, and I think you gave an example around your deal saying that 98% of the investments you might have looked at was around mapping it to a model and just business modeling your way through versus the 2% of entrepreneurs or ideas that have meaningfully inspired you in some way. And I think you said it's around the dream of what it could be. And you gave the example of Facebook as you were explaining, but if you could elaborate a little bit deeper into that 2% of the dream of what it could be. So is it around?
Yeah, in fairness, I do it in every deal.
Yeah.
But the problem is if you do it too much, if it's more than 2%, for me, I'll make bad decisions. So, like, did we want Facebook to connect everybody in the world? Yeah, but, you know, in 2007 when there was 50 employees, that's not a viable thing. So that was 2%. The 98% was we got to grind, right? So I do it in every deal, but it's just like, I just try to limit it so that I don't fall for it, because that creates these biases and blind spots. And then what happens is, if I really fall in love with it, the problem is when they fuck up, what do you do? And if you really believe in the idea of something, the moral or ethical justification, but they're misappropriating capital, so do you let them off the hook because they're more virtuous than another company? That's the danger in investing. So that's why I keep it, it's like dessert. In small doses. You have to be very careful, otherwise you get diabetes and then you die.
Okay, we'll try not to die, but I hope for the socially impactful people that are looking to get invested into you that they find you in their 2%.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to push back, but you can be socially impactful and still have a good business.
True.
Like we're investors in a business that is an FDA licensed machine I've said this many times on the pod, but the error rate in breast cancer surgery in America is 30%. Why is the error rate 30%? It's because hospitals, what do you think their KPI is? It's not lives saved. It's not the delta T of when you're pushed out. It's that it's a real estate business, like a hotel. They have a sunk cost. They have a physical plant, lots of concrete, lots of expensive buildings that have an amortized payback. So they're in the utilization business. So the more you're in the hospital, actually, the more profitable a hospital is. Okay, but we have this business nonetheless that tries to take these error rates to zero. So there's a part of this which is like a beautiful idea, which is not just for breast cancer, but we started in breast, and eventually it can be any kind of tumor, and all of a sudden, you know, you're helping doctors not just in the best hospitals, but any regional hospital, any local hospital, any community hospital. All of that is fine and good. So there's a huge social impact to that. But I'll be really honest with you. If they aren't doing what they need today to generate a pipeline, I am going to fucking run them over. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to get across to you.
Yeah.
I'd love to dream about this device being everywhere and all types of cancer and error rate zero, because think of all the boys and girls that grow up with their moms and dads. That's amazing. I got to put it to the side. I am helping them run that business. I'm their largest shareholder. You need to do what you said you're going to do. And that's what I mean by separating church and state. That's all.
Yeah.
Hey, Chamath, I'm a huge fan. You're my favorite on the show. I know Freebeg gets a lot of love, but you're number one because you saved me a lot of money during November. But my question's around, like, if you're a entrepreneur thinking about a generative AI company, I think you also mentioned on the pod that there are companies like Quora that have like quite a big database, and the advantage is going to be on the underlying data that they can train the models off the back of. Like, how do you compete against, you know, Salesforce, Microsoft, you know, all these big incumbents that have investments, capabilities, data, and how do you compete as like an early stage?
No, if you built the right tool and you expose it in the right way, other auto GPTs will find you on the internet and build to you. And you will have an economic way of saying it costs X. That auto GPT will have a budget and spend X to do their thing. So what do? Is you replace all the sales and marketing. This is what I mean. I don't think there's an idea of customers anymore. It doesn't make any sense to have customers. Customer success, salespeople, marketing people. Those humans will need to do different jobs and they'll have value. But that role, I think, is highly circumspect within 5 to 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
That's how you compete with Microsoft. What is Microsoft? It's an enormous sales and legal department. Those are like the first two places that these auto GPTs will go.
So you try to create a product that's lower cost.
A small product that can fit with other products. And like, think about it. You used to go from monolithic software, now you have the cloud, right? Hundreds of software products, thousands. Well, imagine when you just have trillions of GPTs that are just talking to each other. That's where the world is going. So you're not going to need sales and marketing.
Awesome, thank you.
Hey, what's up? My name is Tark. Sounds like getting beat was pretty integral to your childhood, so that's pretty funny. But you keep saying that you want to ensure that your kids aren't entitled, but I still think that you've yet to give us an answer on how you're going to do that, so that's what I'm curious about.
No, sorry, say the question again?
So you keep telling us that you want to make sure that your kids aren't entitled, but you haven't given us an answer or point us towards how you're going to do that exactly.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm doing it. I'd like them to not be entitled.
Yeah.
But I still want to have a nice vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I really have no clue. There are simple things that I'm trying to do to change my life, but it would be a lie, and I think you smell out the lie, for me to pretend that there's a bunch of things that I can do today, because I can't manufacture me going back and living in a 600 square foot apartment. Can't do that. We eat really healthy. You know, we can afford to not buy the low end of the food pyramid, which is stuffed with high fructose corn syrup. You can see that in the way that their physical bodies are developing, even as they go through puberty. You know what I mean? I was a kid that when I came to Canada, you know the first thing that happened to me? I became really overweight. Because I was consuming all this shitty food. And you can see the school pictures. I was like this in Sri Lanka, and then boom. So yeah, you're right. I mean, like, there's only so many things I can do, because I'm not going to go back to that to create those boundary conditions. I have different expectations of my kids. Like I said, I really want them to be kind people. That may sound like a stupid goal, but I think for them, those are really good building blocks. Being humble, being kind, being very self-aware. For them in their situation, I think that that's very appropriate.
Okay, so let's say hypothetically they grow up, they're entitled and they're jerks. Does that mean that you failed as a parent?
Yeah.
All right, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Tough act to follow. Thanks for coming, Chamath. Thanks for these extra time.
You want me to say like no? Of course that would have meant I failed.
Yeah. My name is Mohammed. I'm an MBA student here. You talked about investing in emerging managers. So curious from the LP perspective, what you look for in those investments. We heard from the GP perspective. Do you look at some version of yourself? Do you look at something idiosyncratic that they might have? Your thoughts there?
Unfortunately, to be honest with you, the folks that I hired that were more idiosyncratic, that looked like me or whatever, turned out to not be successful. The ones that turned out to be the most successful were trained at the pod shops. So what was my takeaway? There's just certain on-ramps for certain jobs, and you can't shortcut that. And that's what I learned, especially when it's about managing money. It's a very complicated business, and you can get stripped of your self-confidence, and it's a very complicated, gnarly job. You can get caught in the undertow very quickly. So you need to really apprentice in mentorship, and those pod shops, I think, do a great job.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Second to last question. We've done it.
No pressure, right? Hey, Chamath.
Hi.
My name's Christine, and I just wanted to thank you for sharing the non-business stuff.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying that.
Hey, Chamath. My name's Samvit. Again, thank you for coming out here today talking to us. I just wanted to redirect the question a bit back to kind of like the idea of like early stage startups. I think there's a lot of talk generally about like what you should do as a VC or what you should do as a founder. But I think I want to like redirect the question to like an employee. So like if I'm walking into kind of like a meeting with, a founder or an engineering manager for like, a Series A, maybe pre-seed, startup, what questions should I be asking? Like what should I base my decision of joining that startup on, especially given the risk that like my equity would be worth nothing in 10 years? And like, what did you do for Facebook, I guess?
I think you have to really understand who you're working with. Immediate manager, other people on your team. I would say if you're going to join a startup as an employee, you really need to know who you're working with, and you need to be quietly interviewing them while they're interviewing you. How smart are these people? How gritty are they? those are the things that really matter, because it can ruin your time. Like I said, you could be grinding away for 16 hours a day, and if you're beside people elbow to elbow with people that are just shitty people, yuck, it'll ruin your time.
So people over product?
What's that?
People over product?
Well, I mean, I think the condition above that, which is what I said before, is if you want to be an employee, you have to join a rocket ship. It's just much easier to give yourself a chance to have some self-confidence. Like I saw a bunch of people that worked at Facebook who were such oddball characters who developed such self-confidence because in that success of Facebook, they found themselves and they turned out to be incredible engineers, and they were not the people you'd have thought would have been the greatest. Barely graduated, some of them fucking barely graduated high school. Went to crappy universities. You know, there was a group of us that didn't go to Harvard or Stanford, which 98% of the rest of that company did, yet we ended up running the place. That was a great place to find our self-confidence.
Awesome, thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks, man. Thank you guys for staying so late.
Thank you very much, Chamath, for having us, being here.
Chamath at Gmail. Send me your ideas if you guys want to do something.
Thanks a lot, Chamath.
See you later, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, bro. Thank you.